Hey guys, welcome back. Ricky here. Alright, so time for another Q&A video. In the video description, I will leave a link to my kit list that will list most of the items that I recommend, that I use, which will probably cover most of the items that I actually talk about in the videos. In that list, you'll find my most updated list of recommended knives, whetstones, and sharpening accessories. Okay, so the next question we have here is from Tobias. Is that Riger? So hopefully I pronounced that right. The question is, quick question, I am new to all of this, but I'm totally hooked. Could you please recommend a beginner's Gyuto and a whetstone to me? Thank you so much for all your great content. You are really inspiring. Well, thank you, Tobias. That's very nice of you to say. Okay, so again, in the video description, you'll find my kit list to all the knives and stones that I have used and recommended. All of the items in that kit list I've actually have used in my studio at some point. But a number of knives that come up to mind. So Gyuto, so I'm guessing you're referring to a Japanese style knife or a Japanese knife. There are a few that come to mind. Obviously the Tojiro DP is a knife that everyone talks about. I think it's an okay knife. I think it's a little outdated at this point. It's still a decent knife. It has a VG10 core steel, a Western handle, and the heat treatment on this knife is about 59 to maybe 60. Overall, it's fine. Now, what's interesting about the Tojiro DP is that a year and a half ago, that knife was actually retailing on Amazon for like $43, and right now the current retail price on that knife is $79.95. It's $80, which is a little bit higher than I think that knife should be selling for, but the cost of VG10 has gone up, and also the cost of labor in Japan has gone up, so I can see the discrepancy there. For $80, let's just kind of cap it off at the $80 mark, since you're a beginner. The Yaxel Mon is a really nice knife. It's got a really great handle. It's got a VG10 core steel as well. Heat treated to a 60 to 61, so definitely a higher treatment, I think a higher quality knife than the Tojiro. The other knife that you might want to look at is a brand new knife by Nexus. It's using a BD1N steel, which is heat treated to a 63, definitely much higher. And that knife is actually retailing for $80, but at launch, I think it's still selling at launch price for $60. And again, it's in my kit list. I don't know what the current price for that knife is, but I'm pretty sure it's at $60 right now. Between the three knives, I think that Yaxel has the best cutting profile. It's got the nicest, I would say, the nicest edge overall. Fit and finish is definitely best on the Yaxel. Second would be the Nexus, and then third would be the Tojiro. The Tojiro overall, I think it's a decent knife, but it's really showing its age. But it's still a fine knife. I don't know where you live. If you live in the US, the Nexus is definitely going to be the cheapest. If you live outside the US, then I don't really know. But again, they're all listed in my kit list. For whetstones, if you are new to sharpening, the King 1000 definitely is a really good stone. The KDS is a fine polishing stone. Now, there are two Kings. There's the King KDS and the King KW65. I would go with the KDS if you're going to buy a combo stone. It's a little bit more money than the KW65, but it has a much higher quality sharpening and polishing stone side. I would definitely recommend you not doing a combo stone if you can avoid it. I would consider a stone like the Cyrex 1000 or the King Deluxe by itself. Now, the King Deluxe by itself is really good for knives up to a 62 on the Rockwell scale. Anything over a 62, it's going to feel a little slow and maybe even a little soft. So my recommendation is going with the least expensive quality stone that I can find that I would really consider a high quality stone is the Cyrex 1000. Definitely is a stone that will grow with you for the rest of your career. I've used that stone now for almost 2 years, and there is not a single knife that I've not been able to sharpen on the Cyrex 1000. Definitely a really fast cutting stone, very high quality stone, very responsive, and it's a soaking stone, so it has that nice organic quality to it. But I will say that sharpening has more to do with your skills, but having a good quality stone will just make everything easier and more enjoyable, more pleasurable to sharpen on. You will never outgrow any of those stones or those knives. They're all great products, so just look at that list. Again, look at the kit list and see what you think. Okay, so the question is from Jonathan Shenhav. That's an interesting name. Never heard that name before. Question is, when you sharpen knives with whetstones, do you slightly water the stone during the sharpening, or do you sink the entire stone in water to clean it? Thank you. Okay, so Jonathan. That's an interesting name. How do I pronounce that? Jonathan. Alright, so the question is, what do you do with your stones? Well, it depends on what kind of stones you have. There are soaking stones and there are non-soaking stones, and then there are oil stones. So this here is a Chaucera. This is a non-soaking stone. meaning that you can throw in water on the surface and you can use it within a few seconds. It's a splash and go / non-soaking stone. The CRX 1000, which I also have, is a... We'll grab the CRX 1000. Oops, I lied. I couldn't find the CRX 1000, but I've got the Rika 5000. Okay, so this is a Rika 5000. It's a soaking stone, and the way you would determine if you're going to soak or splash your stone, or don't soak your stone, is you apply some water on it, and you throw some water on the surface and see what happens. If the water absorbs completely, you have a soaking stone. If the water beads on the surface, you have a splash and go. Very easy to determine. And by the way, you cannot tell if a stone is soaking or splash and go just by looking at it. You really have to throw some water on it and letting it sit there for a few minutes and seeing how it behaves. And also keep in mind, certain stones, certain splash and goes will actually absorb water. The Troceras will absorb a very minimal amount of water on the surface, and you actually will see the surface darken. The Zwilling Kramer stones actually are splash and goes, but they absorb quite a bit of water. And so this is something you just have to realize. It's nothing wrong with that. That's not a defective characteristic of the stone. It just happens. Stones are stones. They're porous, and so water will absorb into them sometimes, and sometimes they don't. I wouldn't say one is necessarily better than the other. It just depends on what you have access to. Generally speaking, splash and goes are a little bit more expensive. In the video description, I have a list of all the stones that I use and that I enjoy. Alright, so the next question we have here is from Tristan Mentor. That's an interesting last name, Mentor. I hope I pronounced that right. The question is, can you explain the difference between the leathers affect the knives when stropping and the type of compound grit you use on each leather? Keep up the good work. So this is not, let me just grab my strops that I actually use, and then we'll discuss some of the different leathers out there. So I have a few items here to just kind of a show and tell, and let me start here. So this is a strop that was sent to me by someone. It's actually it's a $45 strop on Amazon. Kind of expensive for what they offer. It's particle wood base and a really cheap leather and basic green compound. Okay, so it works really well. I think this is like a 6,000 grit compound. It works well, but I think it's like really expensive for what they charge. Definitely don't recommend it. Definitely not worth the money in my personal opinion. But I'm pretty sure this is using a suede. It's using a cheap suede leather, which is like whatever they can find, and throwing some compound on it to load it up and make it effective with the compound. So this type of strop here is only effective if you use a compound. It's no good by itself, and this is where higher quality leathers make a difference. It's probably using some sort of like a suede leather like this one here. I have these just kind of as backing for my bases, but this is essentially what's on it. It's fine, it'll work, but it will not work without any sort of compound on it, just because it's very soft and it will tear, it'll rip, and the silicate is very low on the surface. I have essentially 4 types of leathers that I use, and here's what I use. So this one here has a Latigo. So Latigo leather is a vegetable tan leather, has very high oils on the surface, so it doesn't have a lot of silicate by itself. So by itself is decent for just pulling off some materials from your cutting edge. It actually does a fairly decent job for just a leather. You can load Latigo if you want to. What you'll find is that Latigo tends to absorb a lot of the compounds that you put in it, so you might have to put maybe 2 or 3 layers of the same compound to really get a nice effective layer that won't absorb and still will work on your cutting edge. So Latigo is definitely at least, I would say the least would be the cheapest option you should go. I wouldn't go for anything less than Latigo. Again, Latigo I really enjoy because it's affordable, but it also gives you a decent edge if you have a good compound. If you don't have compound, then you're gonna have to really make sure that your polishing on your knife, on your stone, is gonna be much more effective and much more careful, because the Latigo, you cannot depend on the Latigo leather to give you the good edge by itself. With compound, it can definitely help. The next leather that I use is Buffalo. Now Buffalo is really special in a couple of different ways. It has maybe the same amounts of silicate as Latigo, so it's not it's not going to make your knives sharper by itself. But what's really special about Buffalo is that it's really easy to clean. You can see that it's like really glossy. So you can load any sort of compound on this, and the compound will not absorb into the leather. And also, when you are done with that compound, all you have to do is apply a little bit of mineral oil on this, and the compounds strips right off. So it's very good for those who like to test different compounds and those who are experimenting. I would say the Buffalo is the best way to go because it's affordable. It's just it's just a little bit more expensive than Latigo, but it offers you the flexibility of being able to clean it extremely well. Latigo is very difficult to clean. You almost cannot. You pretty much, once you load Latigo with a compound, you will never fully get that compound off. You can put mineral oil to loosen that compound up, pull that off first, and then apply some rubbing alcohol. That cleans it up a little bit better, but you're never going to be fully. The Latigo leather will never fully let go of the compounds that you apply on it. The Buffalo will never absorb that compound, so it's always. I mean, you can use it for a few months and clean it, and it will look like new again. So that's a really nice thing about Buffalo. That's why I use it in my studio, because when I'm testing different compounds and I want to clean up and don't want to make a new block, I just simply strip it off with some mineral oil and it will just be as new again. This is Buffalo rolled. So rolled Buffalo is very special because it has most of the characteristics of the glossy Buffalo. It's very easy to clean. It's a little bit more matte because all of the Buffalo is actually rolled under like a 10-ton press, and so essentially you're taking this right here and you're pressing it, right? So the leather feels a lot more dense, it's a lot more compact, and so the benefit of having the rolled Buffalo is that you still have all of the great benefits of the Buffalo. It's easy to clean, but now it's super dense, so it's more affordable than equine, which we'll get to, but also has the density of equine. So you're able to strop micro bevels on rolled Buffalo. You can still strop, knives with micro bevels on your Latigos and on your Buffaloes and on any other leather, but the leathers tend to give a little bit, especially Latigo. Latigo tends to be very thick. Most Latigo is sold at like 7 to 8 ounce weight. They go by weight. And so it's about 3 to 4, 4 millimeters or so, 3 millimeters or so. So it's very thick, and so the surface of Latigo tends to give as you're stropping it, but rolled Buffalo stays perfectly flat. So again, it has all the great benefits of the Buffalo, but it stays perfectly flat. Really great for knives with micro bevels. The next leather that I use personally is equine. So equine is a premium grade leather. It costs about 4 to 5 times as much per square foot as Latigo and Buffalo, but it has very high concentrations of silicate. So what that does is that if you don't want to load up your strop, you can simply use it as it is, and it actually will take off a lot more surface debris than a Latigo or a Buffalo would, and so it's very special for that. It's also very dense. So because it is a thinner hide, horse hide is not as thick as cow hide and buffalo hide, it also tends to be very stiff, or not stiff, but it tends to be very dense, and so that's really great for working knives. If you have a knife with a micro bevel that you want to set on your micro bevel and you want to strop that knife with the micro bevel, the equine tends to hold its shape really well, and so it's something that I definitely use a lot. I like this a lot. It's one of those things that I would say when people are looking at the equine strops, I would say buy it without loading it first, and then if you feel like you aren't getting the results that you want, then load it up with something higher. And also, I would recommend you at least loading equine with something over 10,000 grit, because at under 10,000 grit, it just doesn't make any sense. And so I think the quality of leather you get also helps dictate what type of compounds you use. Definitely a premium grade product that I love, and something that I use more frequently now than before, because I don't have much time to sharpen my knives anymore. And the last leather that I use in my studio is shell cordovan. Now, shell cordovan is by far the most expensive leather I have ever seen. Per square foot, it's like $270. It is so pricey, but man, is it nice stuff. So all these other leathers you can pretty much load with any compound that you want. With shell cordovan, I definitely said that you shouldn't load this up unless you have a really high quality compound that is at least 12,000 grit, because it just after you use it for a while, you understand why. When I put like 8,000, 9,000 grit compound, it works, but actually the leather by itself works just as well without the compound. But when you put on things like 12,000, 14,000 diamond grit or diamond Norton compound, then it makes a difference, because the shell cordovan is like glass. You can see here that it's literally like glass. You can see the reflection of my computer right over here. Very dense, very flat, and also really anti-wrinkle. So you actually can with shell cordovan, what the special thing about shell cordovan is that you can actually fold shell cordovan leather on itself, on its face, and you can open it up and there'll be no wrinkles at all. And that's something that no other leather can do. And so you find these on premium purses, you know, and shoes. And people use them on really high-end stuff. I use them for my strops. But this is for, I would say, if you're stropping a regular kitchen knife, you really don't need shell cordovan unless you want to, because you like the way that leather feels and looks. But for most people, you can get all of the great qualities of the shell cordovan with a compound on the equine or on the rolled buffalo. So I see most people using shell cordovan for razors. When you're stropping razors at 40,000 grit, 50,000 grit, 100,000 grit, diamond compounds. But also I don't use wood for my bases anymore. I use glass and carbon fiber, and so they're extremely flat. And so my strops are perfectly flat. And so even if you go to an equine or even the buffalo or the latigo, you're not gonna have any bumps on them. Okay, so I made a very clear choice to get the best bases I can for my strops. And yeah, and so shell cordovan is great. I would definitely recommend you buying something less costly if you're new to sharpening or new to polishing, new to stropping especially. And shell cordovan is great if you do a lot of razors as well. So if you sharpen and strop razors in addition to knives, then shell cordovan may be a good consideration for you. But if you're only doing knives, whether kitchen knives or hunting knives, look at I would say buffalo if you do a lot of different types of compounds that you want to experiment with, and a latigo if you know exactly what kind of compound you'll use and you're willing to add a few more layers of latigo to get the same effect as you would in buffalo, because buffalo doesn't absorb anything, and so you can simply add one layer of that compound and you will get the effective polishing that you were looking for with buffalo. And if you have if you set micro bevels, I would say go with the rolled buffalo because it has all of the great qualities of the buffalo, but it's extremely dense, doesn't give, and will be really great for knives with micro bevels. And equine, if you don't plan on loading up your strops and simply want to let the strop do the work for you without fancy compounds, equine would be the best option for you. Thank you for being here, and I'll catch you in the next video.